Okay, I'll start again. So I have 7 children. I homeschooled for 31 years. All of my children have graduated. My youngest is 21 and just got married, well, a year and a half ago. And we have 11 grandchildren, and I live in Homer. 5 of my kids live here in Homer. One lives in Anchorage, one lives in Michigan. So I get to be around most of my kids and grandchildren most of the time, which is lovely. I love homeschooling. I mostly love what I learned from homeschooling. I am 61 now, so I've been through several different seasons of life. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, is about being in different seasons of life and maximizing the season of life that you're in. When I did this workshop once before at a curriculum fair, and that was 4 years ago. And just before that, I was in the grocery store, and this is my beautiful friend, Brittany, and she had 2 kids at the time. She has more now. And shortly before, I was thinking about this idea, and I was coming up with this workshop, and I went to Safeway, and Brittany and I parked like nose to nose in the parking lot. Coincidentally, I mean, I'm getting out of my car, and I'm like, oh, there's Brittany. Honestly, what happened was I get out of my car and there's this young woman in front of me, and she's putting the toddler in the, she went and got a cart, and then she's getting the toddler settled in the cart, and then she's putting the baby in the backpack and putting the backpack on her back to carry the baby around. And at first I just kind of glanced at her, and the first thing I thought was, oh, I'm so glad that's her and not me. And then she turned around and it was Brittany, and I just laughed, and I told her that I was thinking that not because I didn't love having small children, I did, but because I also remember how much work it is and how hard it is to go to the grocery store with a toddler and a baby. And then we go in the grocery store, and a little bit later, I'm walking down the aisle in the back across the dairy and the meat and stuff. And Brittany was ahead of me, walking away from me, and her baby had his legs sticking straight out on both sides. And I was watching them walk away, and I thought, oh, he's going to run into something on a shelf. And then a couple minutes later, I was in one of the aisles, and I heard a crash in the next aisle over, and I finished what I was doing there, and I went to the next aisle, and there was Brittany looking in dismay at a jar of pasta sauce that was broken on the floor, and waiting for some Safeway clerk to come, kind of guarding it so people didn't run into it, while she waited for somebody to help take care of that. And I gave her a sympathetic laugh because, boy, I've been there, and I said, yeah, I saw you going down the aisle with your baby's feet sticking out. And I thought, oh, that baby's going to knock something off a shelf. And she said, no, it wasn't the baby. It was me, which I also thought was funny. Been there, done that as well. And then a couple days after that, I was at church, and we were doing worship practice. And this is my friend Jackie. I have lots of young parent friends, which I adore, having young parent friends. I love young women, and I love my young friends. And so we were at worship practice. I was printing out some music for them, and Jackie was there with her kids, and there wasn't anybody else there. And she has 3 little boys, and the 3 little boys were, oddly enough, acting like 3 little boys, and they were running around and playing, and they were being very well behaved and all that, but they were boys, and they kept saying, Mom, 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 hey, Mom, Mom, okay. And then she would like tell them, give them directions, and they'd go, okay, Mom. And it reminded me about how often how much of my life was consumed with hearing Mom, 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 and how tiring that is. And so, I clearly remember that season of life. I loved that season of life. I loved being pregnant. I loved having babies. I loved homeschooling. I loved it when my house was full of little people. And I always wanted another baby. I also had 4 miscarriages, so I was pregnant 11 times, people. And I always, every time I had a baby, I thought, I cannot imagine not having another baby. I can't imagine, I knew they were going to grow up and I was going to be in another season of life, but I just couldn't even picture it and couldn't even imagine loving it like I loved the season that I was in. But as it turns out, they did grow up. And now I find that I look at those young moms and I consistently think, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that's not me. And it just makes me laugh every time that I even think that, because when I was in that season, I couldn't imagine it. My daughter, even when she was young, she likes to ask me these broad questions. One time we were driving back from Anchorage and she asked me, Mom, what's your favorite land animal? I thought, land animal. And then, of course, the next question was, what was my favorite water animal and what was my favorite air animal? And so I had to think of, you know, animals in different categories, which frankly made it easier because then I could come up with three favorite animals. But she has asked me before, and other people have asked me before about stages of life. What was your favorite age? When were you happiest? And you know what my answer is? My answer is always this one. It doesn't matter what stage of life I'm in. Probably not when I was a kid, but by the time I was an adult, my answer has always been, this is my favorite stage of life. And it is. I love my life. I love my family. I love the things I get to do. And I just make choices to maximize this season that I'm in. And I think that's a real gift. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. Um, I had a friend in the 80s. I was 27. I had 3 or 4 kids at the time. I had 3 kids at the beginning and then 4 kids when I started the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Homer. And so it took a couple of years, the whole process. And of course, there were lots of other people involved, but I was the one that started the whole thing and that spearheaded the whole project until when we got it open, and so there was a steering committee and then there was a board, and we got busier and busier and busier, and we had somebody, we affiliated with an organization that at the time was called the Christian Action Council. They have a different name now that I don't remember. And we had somebody flew up from California to do the initial training of the people that would be working in the center. And I had a friend that had a bunch of kids at the time, which I did not write down. She has 13 children, and I think she had 9 at the time, could have been 7. Anyway, she didn't sign up for the training, and I didn't expect her to work in the CPC. I knew she wouldn't, but but lots of young women went to her for advice, and so I thought that it was counseling training in essence, and I thought she might like to come to the training. So I called her up and I said, "Hey, all that, and said I thought you might be interested." And she said, "No," she said, "I know it would be helpful and it would be good and all that, but right now for this season of my life, all I do is my kids." And I've thought of that often through the years. It really freed me up at that point in my life. Like I said, I was 27. I had 3 and then 4 kids. And through the years, I've reflected on that many times and applied that many times when I would be in some situation where I would have an opportunity to get involved in something, but I just really couldn't because I mean, I could, but it would take time away from my kids. I just didn't have the time and energy to add that in. But I would tell myself, instead of feeling like, oh, I really want to do that, but I can't because of these kids, I would tell myself, you know what, I can't for this season of my life, but I can probably in another season. There's things that I really enjoy that I'm really interested in, and I can do those in another season. So, I have thought about that many times through the years and really rested in that. It was a real gift that she said that to me at that time when I was so young. And this season that you are in with little people in your house, whether you have 1 or whether you have 7, this season is hard. It's so hard a good part of the time. And part of it is that we look at other people and their kids, and this is kind of how we picture them. They're smiling and they're playing together and they're kind and they're polite and all those things. And then we look at our kids, and sometimes our kids look like this to us, and we just feel like we're in the thick of things, and things seem to be going so much more smoothly for other people. And part of the thing that makes this hard is that everything that you do when you have little people in the house, everything you do has to be done again tomorrow, if not sooner than tomorrow. And so it's so easy to feel like you're not accomplishing anything. And we all know, we can tell ourselves this is the most important job in the world. And if we really think about it, we think that that's true, I mean, we really do know that's true in our hearts, but when the kids are spilling the juice and fighting each other and making messes and slamming doors and whatever, it's sometimes hard to feel that way. Like this really is the most important job in the world. And frankly, sometimes I would feel kind of silly reminding myself that about that. Another thing that I found difficult when I had little kids, I had always been smart. When I went to school, I was one of the smart girls, and I always had something I thought worthwhile to contribute to most conversations. And I think quickly, I process quickly, I'm quick on my feet. And so when I would be in conversations, I would often have something to add to the conversation. But once I had several small children, I found myself in conversations with groups of people, frankly, especially if there were men there, and they might be talking about some kind of current events thing, and I would know what they were talking about. I would have heard that on the news or whatever, but I just felt like I could repeat things I knew, but I didn't have anything to offer about that. And then again, when I was in my 20s, I read a biography of Louisa May Alcott. And frankly, the biography wasn't very good. It was totally forgettable. I don't remember the name of the author or the book, and I didn't like the book. But there was a section in the book that totally impacted me and changed my life also, about how I viewed my life with small children in the house. And there was the author was talking about Louisa May Alcott's father and how he grew up poor and he went to school just through sixth grade or eighth grade or third grade or something, I can't remember now. And then he became a peddler, and he went from farm to farm selling whatever little things, I guess, because he was walking. So I don't know if he had like a cart he was pushing, or maybe he was leading a mule or something. I don't know. I can't remember the details. But um, there was this one paragraph that ended with that he actually ended up with a better education than many people at that time. And the reason was because he would go to a farm, and the farm people would be all excited, the family, to have company, of course. This is a big deal. And in the evenings, they would talk about things, they wanted to talk to him about things he was seeing in the world and what he was hearing from other farmers and other places. And then while the farmers were working in the daytime, he would read anything they had in the house. And and then so he would like read whatever he could, and then they would discuss at night. And then he would leave the farm, and it would take him several days to walk to the next farm. And so he had time to process that information. There was input and there was discussion, and then there was processing time. And I frankly have goosebumps telling you this. It had such an impact on me because it made me realize, oh, that's what I don't have. I don't have time to think. I don't have time to process anything and to come up with my own ideas. And I was so relieved. I thought, oh, good, I'm not suddenly stupid. I just don't have time to think through things and to meditate on things. And so I'm sure I could have managed to find time in my life, but that and the season thing, like, calmed me, like, oh, this is okay. I'm going to have time again later to think, and I'm still going to be smart. And sure enough, that's true. Now I feel smart again. Very relieving. Sometimes people would say to me, particularly like when I was opening the CPC and I have all these kids and I'm busy with church and I'm leading Bible studies or whatever it is that I'm doing, sometimes, often, people would say to me, I don't know how you do it all, because I would have 4 or 5 or 6 kids and they would have 2, and they would feel overwhelmed like we all do, even if we have 1 kid. And frankly, a lot of things are easier when you have more kids, but that's another story. So people would say, I don't know how you do it all. And what I would tell them is that how you do it all is that it's a juggling act. And I have all these different balls in my life. There's my relationship with my husband and my relationship with my kids and stuff at church and personal things, hobby kind of things I enjoy doing, and my friendships and whatever, keep doing meals and doing the laundry, and there's all these things. And when you're juggling, if you keep those balls moving, it's okay. But if I stop and I hold on to any one of those balls, no matter how wonderful that ball is, if I hold on to any one of them for too long, then the other ones start tumbling down to the floor. And so that's the trick, is to kind of keep shifting your attention to other things and keep them going. When my kids were, sorry, in Mother's Day 1994, I had 6 kids. These were their ages. And I wrote a very long poem for Mother's Day, and I put it in our church bulletin. And I want to read it to you. It is very long, but I think that you will identify with it. So it goes, "Hello, honey. How was your day? Let me tell you about mine. Put your feet up and relax. This will take some time." At breakfast, Karen spilled her cereal, which turned out to be a mess. Drew put cat food in Joel's juice, all before we were even dressed. I cleaned up the milk and the cat food while the kids began on their chores. One cleaned the bathroom, one vacuumed the rugs, one did the dishes, and one swept the floors. Karen held up a squished little hamster and declared that he was dead. We didn't even realize she'd gotten him, and now she's picking him up by his head. Jonathan held him and kept him warm, and soon he looked just fine. I wondered what the next crisis would be, for it was only 9. I started to homeschool the kids, but the dog got mud on the floor. As I was cleaning it up, Karen walked naked out of the door. I brought her back and got her dressed while I listened to Caleb read. Joel worked on arithmetic, and Jonathan made a greenhouse for seeds. I made sandwiches for the kids for lunch, and I realized I'd better make bread. Karen played in the bucket of wheat and poured some over little Drew's head. Now there was wheat all over the floor, rolling under our feet. Before I could get it all swept up, the water pipe started to leak. I left the pipes for you, dear. There's a puddle under the sink. I idly wondered what life will be like when I have time to think. Drew and Karen took their naps, so it was quieter for a time. Of course, that was after watching Barney, which drives me out of my mind. Caleb made one of his masterpieces, all with paper and scissors and tape. This time he pasted 6 pages together and made an entire landscape. There was a paper sleeping bag and paper pillow arranged in a paper tent, little green lines for grass, and a brown path, which he said is where the camper went. He made a paper campfire and drew a blue stream and told me how much he loved me. He held Karen and read to her. His tenderness and kindness I loved to see. We piled into the car and off to town, my many errands to run. The kids kept fighting as we drove, making the trip not so much fun. And there I got Christopher from school and helped him with his math. The baby played in the kitty litter, and then he needed a bath. While he was in the bathtub throwing water on the floor, Karen climbed in with all her clothes. I should have locked the door. I was busy cleaning up that mess, so Jonathan and Joel went outside. I found them having a water fight and throwing mud far and wide. Now it was time to fix dinner. I'd had an elaborate meal planned, but I changed my plan to hot dogs tonight and asked Christopher to give me a hand. Hot dogs and chips and carrot sticks. That sounds simple and quick. Caleb squirted ketchup on his shirt. Karen dipped her fingers and gave them a lick. I decided dinner was over. The chips and ketchup were gone. I checked the clock for the millionth time. Bedtime wouldn't be long. Karen and Drew are on your lap. The boys are cleaning their room. If there's any more problems today, it will spell their doom. I'm sorry dinner is not up to par and that the house is not very clean. I can't find time to exercise, and so I'm not very lean. But I read to the children today, and I hugged them when they cried. I was here to train them all day long and give a piggyback ride. The baby and I snuggled in bed as he petted my arm and nursed. Karen kept coming up to me for a kiss with her little lips pursed. Caleb said he loved me dozens of times, and Joel learned how to make change. Jonathan drew a real pretty scene, and Christopher cooked on the range. There are lots of things I want to do, but for now our children come first. This always makes me cry. At times I feel such love for them that I think my heart may burst. There's a time for my desires later, so I'll put everything on hold. I've played their games and sang their songs and listened to the stories they told. The value of the things that I do now is sometimes hard to measure, but of all the titles I'll ever have, Mommy is the one I treasure. So, all those things really did happen, not in the same day, but that's how it is through the day. Lots of times there's just so many crazy things that go wrong, and you feel so pressured, and it's so easy to feel like you're not doing a very good job because some days things are just kind of falling apart around you. And it's really important. Thanks, Amy. It's really important to focus on the little things. Yeah, the house is a mess, and yeah, I didn't get to fix the dinner I had planned, and we had to throw out a bunch of the wheat and whatever, but but I listened to my kids, and we played games together, and um, they learned how to do whatever in math or whatever. So I want to talk to you a little bit about focusing on this season and a few little things to focus on while you're in this season. When you're, in that whole thing of juggling the balls, when you're focusing on the kids' ball, it's really important to discipline them consistently. And when you're disciplining them, I think it's important to think through, to distinguish between childishness and rebellion, because they just do things that they're not challenging your authority. They're just kids and they're acting like kids. We used to, I can't remember if I have this in here somewhere later, but we used to say often, stop acting like a 5-year-old or stop acting like a 2-year-old or whatever to our kids. And it was really just our joke to ourselves, because we would, of course, be saying it to the 5-year-old or the 2-year-old or the 7-year-old or whatever it was. And they would kind of look at us sometimes and go, I am 5 or whatever. And it was our way of reminding ourselves that, yes, this is really frustrating. Yes, I wish this kid would stop doing this. But you know what? He's 5 and he's acting like he's 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever it is. And he's actually acting very appropriate for that age, and give him grace for that. But on the other hand, when they're actually being disobedient and they're actually challenging your authority, you need to nip that in the bud. And it is so much easier when they are younger. The more you get on that when they're younger, when they're really little, the better. Um, Another thing is to insist on respect from the kids. They need to treat you with respect. They need to treat other people with respect. They need to treat their siblings with respect. They need to treat themselves with respect. When they're like toddlers, they have really big emotions. Their emotions swing very wildly. And we had a rule in our house all the way through really with the kids, that um, I was concerned about, I didn't want to give my kids the impression that anything was wrong with their emotions. Emotions are what they are. Sometimes I have strong emotions and I need to go to my room and cry. And I'm sure you all can relate to that as well. And that's okay. Yes, Diana, this is being recorded. Thanks. Um, so it's so we would, our rule for our kids was, we would say, you know what, if you need to cry and scream and yell and kick your feet, stomp your feet or whatever, that's okay. If you're very, very angry or very, very frustrated or whatever, that's okay. But it's not okay for you to inflict yourself on everyone else in the house. So you go in your room and you do those things, and then when you're done, you can come out. And sometimes when we would send them to their room, they would get louder because, of course, they want to be heard. That's the whole point. And then I would go close the door and I would say, this is not okay. You cannot inflict yourself on everyone else. You can deal with your emotions. And when you have them under control and you want to behave nice around everybody, you can come back out. And they would invariably come to the door and go, can I come out now? And my answer was always the same. It's up to you. If you're ready to behave yourself, yes. If not, no. If you still need to cry some more, stay in your room. And sometimes they'd come out and they'd have to go back, whatever. But that was the rule, was don't make everybody else's life miserable. But it's okay to have those emotions. When my third son, Joel, was almost 2 or was right around 2, and we went to the midwife for a checkup, or I had a newborn baby or something. Those kids are 22 months apart. And um, and it was the midwife that was seeing me, so I probably was still pregnant, I guess. But the midwife came in. Oh, I know. I think he was 18 months old. And the midwife came into the room and he was throwing a fit about something. And my husband was holding him and had him on his hip and he was screaming. And my husband turned to him and went, stop. And he, no kidding, stopped mid scream. His mouth was wide open and he just cut it off. I don't know why he did that. It was typical for him to stop. It wasn't typical for him to stop mid-scream. So that was amazing. But she just dropped what she was doing. She goes, I have never seen anything like that before. And he was the most strong-willed of our children. But we did train them even when they were really little, even by the time they were 18 months old, that they can't behave like that around other people. And and it would come in handy when we were out somewhere and didn't have a good room to send them to. And it's really important to teach them kindness and respect and politeness. When my oldest was 18 months old, I can remember where we were living at the time, we had a big kitchen and a little family, and so I had lots of extra cabinet space, and we had cabinets that were devoted just for him to be able to play in, and toys were in there or whatever. And so he wanted to get into one of his cabinets, and my husband was in the kitchen, and he was standing in front of the cabinet, and Christopher went over to him and like tapped on his leg and said, "Excuse me." And my husband went, "Where did you learn that?" And I said, "Haven't you been saying to excuse me to him when he's in your way?" And my husband was like, "No." And I said, "Well, start doing that." you know. And I always said please and thank you and excuse me and everything to my kids, and they were by and large really polite most of the time. And then it was another thing that was such a joy as they got older and they would go to play at somebody else's house. And you know how you just go through like day after day, you feel like you spend all day correcting children sometimes. And I feel like such an ogre sometimes because I felt like I was always on their case about something. And then they'd go play at somebody else's house and the mom would bring them back or drop them off or whatever and would say, "Wow, thank you so much for letting Christopher come play at my house. He was so polite." And they got done playing and he started picking up and he got my kids picking up and she's dropping him off and he's thanking her for dropping him off and letting him play there today and stuff. And my husband and I would just say, "Oh, thank you. I'm glad that worked out well," or something, and try to act like we weren't shocked. And then later, when the kids could not see our face either, we would look at each other and be like, "Oh my goodness, what happened?" And just laugh about how, okay, apparently we're doing something right because they're behaving good at other people's houses. This is really great. Another one of the balls, of course, is your spouse. And you need to remember to put your marriage first. And frankly, it's something that you have to remind yourself to do. You know, we're so wrapped up with our kids all day long. I would have to deliberately make time to focus on my relationship with my husband. Coincidentally, today is our 40th wedding anniversary. Am I spending time with my husband? No, I am talking to you, but but we're spending time later tonight. Anyway, it gives that's the primary relationship in your home is not your relationship with your kids, it's your relationship with your spouse, and it gives your kids stability and safety and security. Thanks, Andrea. Andrea wrote happy anniversary. um, it makes your kids feel safe and secure when they see a healthy, nurturing relationship between their parents. It's really important for the atmosphere of the home and the stability of the home and for their spirits. It helps them to be calmer if you kind of push them aside a little bit to make time for your relationship with your spouse. It's a really important message to be giving them. And another one of those balls is your friends. Women need girlfriends, not that they all have to be women that you're friends with, but women do need women friends. We need friends to hang out with and chat with and play with and complain to and ask advice of and talk about things that don't have anything to do with our household and our family and just play and have fun together. And that's really important. Um, Another thing is to make time for yourself. I think that it's important not to take yourself too seriously. And it's easy to do sometimes because you feel like I am shaping these little lives and the rest of their lives depends on how I handle this situation, which sometimes is kind of true, frankly. And most of the time it's not quite that big a deal. But lots of times throughout the day, we're in situations where you just have to choose whether to laugh or cry. One time when I was getting the kids up, and I probably had 6 kids at the time, and Karen it was before we moved here. So she turned 4 just before we moved into this house. So she was younger than 4. And she I was getting the kids up and I was laying on on the bottom bunk on the bunk bed and just kind of laying around with the kids. And she was sitting next to me, and I put my arms up over my head, and I had a sweatshirt on, and the top of it came up a little bit, and you could see the stretch marks on my stomach. And she went, "Ooh, what are those?" And she was like running her fingers along the corrugation of my stomach. And so this is my little girl, she's going to have those too someday. So probably. And so I said, well, when a mommy grows a baby inside her, her tummy gets really big and it stretches out her skin. And actually, what happens is it tears the skin a little bit under the surface, but it doesn't hurt. You don't feel it, but it makes these marks, and then these marks stay. And she went, "Ooh," and she's like feeling my stomach, and she goes, "Everybody in Alaska must have been in there." So that gives you some idea how many stretch marks I have. But it did totally crack me up that she thought that, from the way it looked, it must have been everybody in Alaska. Um, let's see. Oh, and this is where I was going to say that about remember that they're kids and how we joke about don't act like a 2-year-old or whatever. And then it's important to take some space. I would um, send my kids to their room sometimes, not very often, but when I was talking about my friend Jackie and how all her kids were going, "Mom, mom, mom," I had quite a few kids actually the first time I did this, but one time I thought, "Oh my gosh, if somebody else wants my attention, I'm going to scream at them. This is not okay." And so I got my kids' attention and I was like, "Okay, listen to me." And I said, "You know what? I know that you only have one mom, and I love that you want to tell me things and show me things, and I love that you want my attention and that you want me to be looking at you and listening to you, and that's really important to me. But I have 6 people who are all day long saying, 'Mom, mom, mom, mom.' I need a break. I need you guys to all go to your rooms. You can all go to the same room, whatever. I don't care. I need you to go someplace else and close the door and leave me alone for a few minutes." And the big people would take the little people with them because my kids were quite spread out. I have 19 years between my oldest and my youngest kid, and they would just leave me alone. Honestly, it'd only be 5 or 10 minutes, but sometimes that's all you need. And I just felt like that was really honoring to them, to be honest. Or like some days, if I had PMS or whatever, I was having a hard day for whatever reason, which we all have those days sometimes. And if I was having a hard time, I would tell them that. I'd say, "You know what? I am having a really hard time today. I am really on edge. You want to be really careful because I might lose it over nothing." And they would go, "Oh, okay." And then they would be really careful. And it wasn't like they were walking on eggshells. I mean, I felt like that was honoring to them to just tell them, "Hey, this is where I'm at right now. And I need you guys to help me out." And yeah, I'm talking about saying things like that to like the 4 and 5-year-olds too. They can understand that. And I loved it. I mean, we worked together to protect them. And then another thing is to figure out what your priorities are for your family. I did a Bible study once a really long time ago from the Navigators, and the final thing in this Navigators Bible study was to take a half day of prayer at the end. And so I did, and I was pretty stressed out about the kids at the moment, and I was concerned about some behavior issues with some of the kids. And so I took that half day of prayer and I was like, that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to spend concentrated prayer on each one of these kids and kind of focus on what's wrong with them. And then we got there, we met together for a couple of minutes, and then we kind of split up for a few hours, and then we came together just for a few minutes at the end. And I went off into the woods a little bit, and I came back and I sat in a classroom for a while, and I opened my Bible and kind of played Bible bingo, and I opened it up to Philippians 4:8, where it talks about whatsoever things are pure and lovely and good and trustworthy, yada yada, meditate on these things. I thought, okay, fine. And so instead of focusing on what was wrong with my kids, I thought, okay, I need to focus on what's going well with my kids. What are the things I admire? And I spent time thinking about each one of my kids, and I made a list for each one of my kids about these are the things that are really great about these kids. And it was an amazing exercise. Trust me, if you're getting really stressed out with your kids, do that. Give them to your husband or a friend or something. Go away and make a list of the things that you really admire in each one of your kids. It totally changed my focus, and those other things, not forever, but for that week. And not that there aren't things that we need to work on, and I do need to focus on, helping to shape these things that aren't so good. But it's easy to get caught up in that and not be focusing on the things that are special and distinctive about them. Another thing was that I spent time thinking about, okay, once I was a few kids in, I was like, okay, I just need to decide what's the bottom line, what really matters here. And I spent some time kind of meditating on that. And my conclusion was that for me, for my children, for my family, for what was in my heart, what was most important that I needed to teach them was unconditional love and immediate obedience. And that's another whole story we can talk about anytime you want. But that was what I wanted to convey to them. And frankly, I did a really good job at that. And I had a couple of kids that were when they were teenagers, we had a really hard time with them. I have a son that we kicked out of the house when he was 16, and he never, ever doubted that we loved him, ever. It never crossed his mind that we were angry at him or wanting to separate ourselves from him. That's another whole story. But anyway, when you figure out, like, here's my priorities, and yours may be that, and yours may be something else. It doesn't really matter. But whenever you're, Jane posted, one of my mom mottos is, don't think, how can I make them do this, but rather, how can I help them do this? I love that. That's great, Jane. Thank you for sharing. Once you focus on what's really the bottom line, and really, I mean, I got it down to those two things. This is what's important. These are the two things that I want my kids to come to adulthood with. And so it makes a lot of the little decisions easier. In the moment when I am upset and I want to scream at them, and do scream at them, frankly, more than I should have probably, I part of my mind would be thinking, okay, am I teaching them unconditional love? You can discipline a kid, you can spank a kid and convey unconditional love. Anyway, that's also another whole story. So the key to really appreciating the season that you're in is to look to the future while enjoying the moment. To making the key to making the most of any season of life you're in, whatever season it is to focus on where you're at. I am never bored. I do not understand people, adults, that say that they're bored. The last time I said I was bored, I think I was like 9. And people sometimes are posting online now, that they're not working in their home. People are posting that they're bored, and I think, what is wrong with you? Oh my goodness, I could fill up 48 hours in a day. And some of that is that I embrace the moment, and I'm thankful for the little things. And I can always, always, always think of things that could be worse. For heaven's sakes, people, we live in America, Our lives are better than the lives of so many people in the world. And so even if I'm feeling crowded, I'm living in a 2-bedroom house with 4 kids, which I did. We lived in a 600 square foot house with 2 teeny tiny bedrooms with 4 kids. And when I would feel like, oh, it is so crowded, this house is too small for the 6 of us, I would think, well, if we lived in Russia, we'd have 3 families living in a house this size. And you know what? We have a ceiling, we have heat, we have food. Things can be worse. Things can always be worse. And don't spend a lot of time dwelling on what you don't have or can't have or what you've lost. It's appropriate to mourn something that you've lost, but then let it go. I heard somebody on Focus on the Family a long, long time ago, a couple that worked with a ministry for people that had handicapped kids. And one of the things they said that really stuck with me was that people who give birth unexpectedly to a handicapped child often struggle with accepting that child because this is not the child that they expected. And then they feel guilty because they feel like they're rejecting this baby, and they feel guilty about that, and they're just caught in this spiral and just trying to like force themselves to get over it or something. And so what this couple was saying was, no, that's okay and that's healthy. And what it is that you had this baby in mind. This is the baby you expected, and you didn't get this baby. So go ahead and mourn that baby that you didn't get. And when you mourn that baby, that frees up your emotions to love this baby and not resent this baby. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that is so wise. And so I've done that ever since when I can't have something I really want, or I lose something that was important to me, or a relationship or an item or whatever. I just let myself go ahead and mourn that thing, not throw me into a tailspin and not for months or anything, but just go ahead and be sad about that and give myself permission to be sad about that. And then that frees me up to love again. So, and another part of that is that none of us can go ahead if we're looking back. Give yourself to this season and to the seasons ahead. If you're in a car and you're focusing on the rearview mirror like this, it is important to look back. You do need to see what's in the rearview mirror. But if you're focusing on the rearview mirror, then you're not seeing what's around you and what's ahead of you clearly. You need to glance in the rearview mirror from time to time, and you need to focus on what you're in right now and what's coming up ahead. So that's really important. Another thing that's really important is forgive yourself. We all make mistakes. I hate to tell you this, but every one of us are terrible mothers sometimes. And just forgive yourself. You're still learning. You're on a journey, and don't partner with a lie. Tell yourself the truth. It would be easy for me. I would do something that I, yell at my children or whatever, and then I would feel so guilty, and I would feel like, oh, you are such a terrible mother. Or sometimes it'd be the end of the day and I would just be having a really hard day with them, and I'd finally get them to bed and think, oh my goodness, I'm so glad they're in bed. And then reflect on how awful I was to them that day and feel like such a terrible mother. And I would think, I'm a terrible mother. But eventually I learned I need to change those tapes. And I would tell myself, when I catch myself thinking I'm a terrible mother, I would tell myself out loud, I'd say, no, you're not. You're not a terrible mother. You're a good mother that had a hard day, or you're a good mother that made a mistake, or you're a good mother that yelled at them when you weren't supposed to, or you shouldn't have, or overreacted, or whatever, got on their case for childishness instead of disobedience or whatever. Um, you just make mistakes, and you need to forgive yourself for making those mistakes. You need to craft an environment that says, I am loved, I am forgiven, I am accepted, I am safe, and the people around you will flourish. If you craft an environment in your home where you believe those things, and your husband believes those things about himself, and your children believes those things about themselves, you will all flourish. You will have a very healthy home environment. Um, and your vision of the end affects how you live your life today. This picture was taken 4 years ago. It's me and my husband, our 7 kids, their spouses, however many grandchildren we had at the time, which was not 11. Let's see, I see 5 in there. So this is, we've accumulated all that, but um, our house is a safe place. My kids' friends would come and just hang out. One time we came home and we found 4 kids in our house. We'd been out with the baby at the grocery store, and we came back with the baby and the groceries, and we were putting them away. And there were 4 kids in my house, and we just figured they were friends with 2 of our boys that were close together in age. We just figured that those kids were upstairs, but they didn't come downstairs. Michelle, I'm going to post the recording after the fair's over. And so we would, so some time went by and we went, so is Jonathan upstairs? And they were like, no. We said, is Joel upstairs? They went, no. And we go, what are you guys doing? And they said, oh, we just needed a place to hang out for a few hours. So we thought, let's go over to The Simpsons. And it just totally cracked me up that there they were in our house. They had, that they felt that it was a safe place and that we need some place to hang out. So we could just go into the Simpsons house, make ourselves at home. And it was true. They were very dependable and responsible and respectful and all that stuff. So it just made me laugh. And one of my sons would bring home girls to me to hug if they were having a hard time, or they were struggling with their parents, or they weren't feeling loved, or they didn't have much self-respect and they didn't feel that they were worthy of honor. He would just invite them over to the house, and and introduce me, and I would be kind and welcoming to them, and I would hug them. And after I did that a few times, actually, I asked him, I said, you know, I'm assuming you're bringing these girls home for me to hug. Is that true? And he said, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I mean, it was a deliberate thing that he was doing when he was in high school, because he felt that they needed a mom to hug them, or they needed somebody to hug them maybe, and he thought it could be inappropriate for him. Um, the two kids that we struggled with a little bit once they were out of the house, they would often, they still tell us often what great parents we were. And even at that time, even the kid we kicked out of the house, he stayed with other people, and he would come by regularly, and he would tell us, you know, I don't want to come home, I don't want to obey your rules, but oh my goodness, you guys are such good parents. And my friends have much more difficult relationships with their parents. It's the teenagers that we had the hardest time, the two kids that we had the hardest time with when they were teenagers are the ones that love us the most and appreciate us the most now, because we were able to walk through that conveying unconditional love, and that we needed instant obedience from them. And when they were going through a season where they could not obey us, um, thanks, Catherine. Sorry, I keep getting messages once in a while and I can't stop myself from reading them. Anyway, that when they were going through a season where they could, you know, couldn't make those choices to give us the obedience that we needed, they still know that we love them. When Nathan was little, he's my youngest, he'd be in bed asleep, and I would always go in and see all the kids, but before I went to bed, and he'd be asleep in his bed, and I would stroke his hair, and I would kiss him on the temple, and I would whisper, I love you. And he would look very asleep, and sometimes he really was asleep, and he wouldn't open his eyes or anything, but I would say, I love you. And he would, not always, but sometimes he would say, I know. And I just love that. I have goosebumps again. That is my favorite answer in the world. I would much rather hear that than I love you too. I mean, it's important to me that he loves me, but he's a kid. Kids don't really understand love when they're little. But the fact that his sleepy, not really there automatic response to me saying I love you was, I know. That's what I want in his heart. I want him to know that. I have a video, and I learned this morning that I cannot play this video. So, I mean, I can play it, but you can't hear it. So I'm just going to let it run for a minute anyway while I tell you about it, because I am the fair coordinator. I've asked all the vendors, which I said in last night's email, that if they recorded their session, that I would post the link to their session. And I'll be posting this, and I'll post this video separately. But this is actually a video from a food company in Australia or something. And they're asking these parents, if you could have dinner with anybody you wanted to, who would you have dinner with? And they're naming various famous people, and it's pretty funny. And then they start calling their kids in, and so the parents are all nervous because they can see, oh my goodness, the kids are on the screen, I wonder what they're going to say. And they ask the kids who they want to have dinner with, and they say their parents, that's who they want to have spend time with. They go, does it have to be somebody famous? And the guy with the camera is like, no, it can be anybody you want. And they are all saying, mom and dad, I just want to talk with mom and dad. It's a lovely video, and I guarantee it'll make you cry. It's beautiful. But you know what? You guys do this every day. You pour into your children's lives every day, and are creating that environment in their hearts where they want to just be with you and spend time with you and learn from you, and pick up family culture from you. You're planting seeds in their hearts that are going to bear fruit, and you're doing a great job. Even when you're totally screwing up and you're being a terrible mother, forgive yourself and just move on to the next thing, and be gracious with your kids, and they'll be gracious with you. They're very forgiving, and that's who they want to spend time with, as you. And you're doing a great job. So that's the end of my PowerPoint, and we have hardly any time left, but does anybody have any questions? I can just stay here for whatever. If you want to ask a question, if you put your hand up, I can unmute you theoretically, and or you can type something in the question box and I can respond to that. Or if you have something you want to share, see, I see a question. Oh, that's from before. Okay, I can see a little question mark sometimes. Catherine said, I'm glad that I wasn't on video for this one. I'm crying like a baby now. LOL. I totally get that. I can't get through this one. I've done it twice before, actually. I did it once at a idea fair, and I did it once as a sermon. My husband was there and he was like, oh my goodness, this is so good. You need to share it at church. And I modified it a little bit and did it as a sermon at church, but I can't get through several parts of it without crying because that's what's closest to our heart is our relationships with our children and with our family and how we're interacting with them and the way that we're impacting them. And I hope that this has been an encouragement to you and that you know how special you are, that you feel how special you are and what a great job you're doing. You're doing the most amazing job with your kids by you're pouring your life into them, and it's okay if you feel stupid. I hope you were here for the earlier part because it only makes sense if you were here for the other story. Anyway, I really appreciate those of you that came, and I really appreciate the little words of encouragement that you've thrown in here. Frankly, I'm happy that several of you are commenting to me that you're crying. That's really part of the goal. My definition of a really good presentation is that it makes people laugh and it makes people cry. So hopefully I've accomplished both of those in a couple of places. I am a big believer in being real, and I'm perfectly happy to share areas that I have screwed up in because we all have plenty of those. And when I did this before, I did it as the keynote speech actually, because the keynote speaker had to back out at the last minute. And so poof, I became the keynote speaker. And so I did it in 4 different cities, and my boss was at all of those. And after the first one, or maybe the second one, I said to him, oh my gosh, that poem is so long. I'm taking so much time out of it to read this really long poem. Is that dumb? Is that a bad idea? Should I pull? I said, I think I might pull it. I think that's what I was saying, actually. I was like, I think I'm going to remove that poem. And he was like, oh no, don't remove it. Leave it. So several of you have commented, oh, I really like that poem. It does go on and on and on. But at least I warned people before I started. So that's a good thing. I'm just rambling now. Do any of you want to say anything? I am skimming to see if there's any hands raised. Does anybody have any other tips about handling your family with young kids around and learning how to forgive yourself and value yourself and make your husband a priority, things like that? Really, our time's up, and we should. Katie wrote, I love this, Katie, thank you. She goes, it's only long to you because you're anticipating the crying part. It's not long at all. And Andrea posted that she puts scripture notes on the fridge. Boy, that's a good trick too, isn't it? I used to try to memorize scripture. I was never very good at it, to be honest, but I would put them on 3x5 cards and tape them on the bathroom mirror because then I would see it every time I was in the bathroom and when I was brushing my teeth and stuff. And so it'd be a lot of moments here and there to be working on memorizing whatever you want to memorize, whether it's scripture or whatever it is that helps you to be inspired and helps you to be a better person. Those are all good things. Magnet strips. Andrea says, I use magnet strips and laminate them. Magnet strips for what? For things you're trying to memorize? Oh, the scripture notes, maybe. Anyway, I can unmute you if you want to talk, Andrea. I think I can. Of course, probably some of you have crying babies in the background. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. Oh, yeah, stop, think, act. Those are good reminders too. There's a thing, I can't remember, that I used to have on my fridge that has like 3 or 4 questions, and it's like the idea is like before you say something, is this useful? Is it helpful? Is it kind? I think there's another one, but I can't remember what the other one is. Anyway, that was good for me to see on a on a regular basis. Ah, Catherine has "You are enough" on a bathroom mirror quote, or else she's going to do that. That's not really clear, but that's true. Anyway, I guess we'll go. I just like hanging out with you guys, even though nobody's talking. Maybe that's what I like about it. Maybe I talk too much. Anyway, thank you so much for honoring me by coming and being attentive and being a part of this. That's part of the joy of being in this season of life is being able to talk to young moms and encourage them that they're doing a good thing and that even on the days when they feel really stressed and feel like they're doing a terrible job, that they're not, that we all have days like that and that you'll be in another season of your life. Oh, thanks so much, Jane. That's sweet. Anyway, I have one more talk in a couple of days about how to be the perfect homeschooler. And if you listen to this one, you can probably anticipate what I'm going to tell you about how to be the perfect homeschooler. Um, I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. Love you. Bye.